Hey everyone, hello, hello. Please feel free to take your seats. Welcome to the University Track for Austin Startup Week. We're so glad to have you. This is the first time in UT history that we've ever done a University Track, so we're having some incredible conversations today around the ecosystem here on campus and how we're connected to the Austin startup scene and what's coming from it. I'm pleased to introduce this incredible panel and moderated by a truly amazing woman. Van Truscott is the Director for Technology Innovation and Development at the Office of Technology Commercialization. She's a highly accomplished inventor and leads jetting technology development for Canon Nanotechnologies, Inc. Her innovations have solved many of the fundamental and important problems for enabling nanoscale manufacturing in semiconductors, hard disk drives, and flexible films for display applications. She holds 71 patents, 15 here in the US, 56 international, that have guided the design and manufacturing of every related part of both molecular imprints and Canon Nanotechnologies nanoprinting processes. And we're so lucky to have her at UT. So without further ado, Van.
No pressure today. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, and so thankful for all of you to join us on this panel today. I'm going to start off with introducing our panelists. I've got Bart Bond, who is the partner at ATP, and we have Nishi Vishwanathan, who is the director of Texas Health Catalyst, and then Greg Poe, who is the interim executive director of IC Square, and Eric King Fry. Yeah. It's tricky, and he's the CEO and co-founder of Menoxa?
Menoxa.
Okay, so I've already been introduced, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let our panelists tell us a little bit about their role and what their institution does and how they service the community. And in particular, I would also like to know if you were to choose a spirit animal, what that spirit animal would be. So last night I did a survey, and apparently I'm a deer, and it means that I am determined but gentle in my approach, so I will be today. Bart?
So my name is Bart Bond. My favorite thing to do is when I get to stand at whiteboards with founders and help them solve the most critical problem that's stopping them. And so I end up building lots of programs so entrepreneurs come to me. I was at ATI, the university's incubator, for about 10 years. And in that time, the main focus was how to get more startups out of UT. And so at the time, our portfolio was about 85% founders from the community and 15% from the university. And it took us about 8 years and lots of different programs and classes to get it to more to 50-50 balance. And so that led to co-founding 3-Day Startup, SEAL, which is the summer accelerator for the university, several classes and other programs. We launched a bioscience incubator, since that is so IP focused and university focused. So we create all these programs that drive more entrepreneurship out of the university. Now ATP is an early stage venture capital firm focused on the heartland universities to help, again, get deal flow off campuses out of the 75% of research that our nation does that is not in Boston or Silicon Valley. Oh, my spirit animal.
Yes, that's very important, because it'll define you throughout this
I usually
panel.
get like a blue whale, because I just don't come up for air very often. I'm just kind of cruise around in the depths out in the middle of nowhere.
Very nice. Great.
Hi everyone, I'm Nishi Vishwanathan, and like Van said, I'm the director of Texas Health Catalyst, and just like the name indicates, it's a catalyst for health technologies. And this is part of Dell Medical School's efforts to foster innovation, do innovation in a different way, where we are focusing more on solving real problems versus the technologies themselves. So the idea for us is to provide the right support at the right time to health entrepreneurs who face very different challenges, even worse challenges than other entrepreneurs. So that's really the essence of the program. And I myself, I'm a medical doctor turned researcher turned entrepreneur. So I have gone through many of those pains and challenges. And one of the companies that I worked with was actually spun out of UT Austin. So that was also a huge, uphill task as well. So having gone through all that, I would love to do something to make that process a little bit easier, a little bit better. So that's what I'm here for. And I have no idea what my spirit animal would be, but I would say I'm a problem solver. So what kind of animal would that be? Like, who looks at everything as a problem and tries to get around it creatively? I don't know what.
We'll have to ponder that and
Okay. So
come
I
up with
have
one
no
by the
idea.
end of the panel
Yeah.
for you.
So the one thing that I can say is that I hate to do things in the same way. So just like Dell Medical School's philosophy is rethink everything, that's really apt for somebody like me, because if you give me a very structured process of here is like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are your steps, then I am probably not the right person for that job. Like, I would probably like do 4 first, or say scrap the whole thing. So that's really what, I do on a day-to-day basis, try and make things better.
So my name is Greg Pogue, and I'm the interim director at the IC Squared Institute. That stands for Innovation, Creativity, and Capital. It's been around for over 40 years. The focus of that was really trying to answer the question, what is an innovation ecosystem, what are the components, and what can it do? What we learned was that innovation, creativity, and capital are, of course, critical. But where to find the innovation? How do you prepare people to shepherd that in the form of startups, scale-ups, technologies had to be learned. And Austin, I think, is a representative of that laboratory that came out of what IC Squared is doing. What I've been doing for the last 7 years there is working to try to, I had the great privilege to work with these folks, which is amazing, but really work to get the research on campus impacting what we teach and what we do in the community. Rather than just have experience, how do we ground this? And so we've worked with over 35 faculty funding students. We've engaged these students in both research and practical projects. We link startups with students for internships, and we have helped over 90 students in the last year actually have international entrepreneurship experiences. We're very proud of how that has changed perspectives, changed opportunities. So my background is I'm actually a biochemist, a virologist by training, and I've been involved in building 6 startup companies. One of them went public, another one was sold, others were partnered with large pharma, and one of them failed miserably. There we go. But that's the nature of the game. My excitement, much like Bart's, is how do I get in front of a founder and work with them to answer critical questions? And how do we then link students into that project? It's been very exciting. Spirit animal, I think snow leopard.
Snow leopard, ooh,
I think that's
unexpected.
because of agility, because Lord only knows working in the university and having startups require that. Different ways. And I think I've, even though I would never say I'm a risk taker, my whole life has been on the precipice of risk all the time. So there we go.
Right on the edge.
Great. Oh wait, I've got a mic.
You got a mic.
I've got a mic.
I got a mic.
Hi, I'm Eric Fry. I'm the local entrepreneur, startup founder. I founded a company called MedNoxa. It's an early stage healthcare biotech company based on university IP. So I came to the University of Texas in the Master's of Science in Technology Commercialization program at McCombs Business School with a very diverse background, and certainly not in biotech. But I got really interested and excited about all the opportunities afforded by university IP and what is out there and how it could be transformed into a startup. So what was a year-long capstone for me in the MSTC program became a licensing negotiation with Purdue University, some of that flyover country Bart's talking about, but a great biomedical engineering school and phenomenal IP and a phenomenal culture to work with on tech transfer. And then I've been working on commercializing that technology with Purdue for 2 years now. And most recently, I've been working with UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas on evaluating a new novel biologic drug for commercialization potential as well. And I've had the opportunity to work with all of these individuals and their organizations in different capacities. So when they talk about plugging startups in with resources and with students, I've experienced all of that. I think to about the fullest. So happy to share that perspective as well, and excited about this conversation, because there's, I think, a gold mine to be tapped with the right resources and the right processes. So, yeah. Oh, spirit animal. Polar bear.
Polar bear.
A polar bear, I would say.
We have a snow theme kind of going.
Yeah, you know, kind of adverse environment, likes the cold. I am a Viking by heritage, and Central Texas does not necessarily agree with me. But you know, a determined beast. So there you go.
Wonderful. So I'd like to poll our audience real quick just to understand who we have here today. How many of y'all are just UT students? Show of hands. In the business school? In engineering? Natural sciences? Okay, it's business school mainly. Now, how many people do we have from the military? Ooh, thank you for coming. What about private industry? Very nice. Good turnout. Startups. Wow, loving it. So I'm really glad you all are here, and perfect. So as you know, the panel is on emerging technology off college campuses. And so universities and colleges have been a wonderful source for innovation as well as expert technical foundations through the years. And because of these, we've been able to enrich our lives and impact our economy, not just locally, but globally. And UT has been a great source of some of this innovation. Some examples are, if you don't know, John Goodenough is the co-inventor of the lithium-ion battery, who has been, who I've thanked every day so that my cell phone can keep a decent charge by the time I pick up my kids.
He also invented RAM memory.
He did, I didn't know that.
Yes, which is everywhere.
Yes.
It's shocking how much he impacted our mobile device in our
Yes,
life.
and he's on his way to inventing a second type of
Yeah.
battery that's going to be even better. And so our office has been working with him on commercializing that. You may also know of Dr. Adam Heller, who is in the chemical engineering department. He's the inventor of the glucose sensor, blood glucose measuring system, where they're using the smallest amount of blood out there, about 300 nanoliters, and it's painless. He's also inventing a continuous glucose sensing device where there's a little patch with one single filament that is in contact with your skin. And you're able to wear this for about 2 weeks, and it's continuously monitoring what your glucose level is without pricking your finger. And so for those that are squeamish, this is a godsend. And lastly, we have Dr. Joe Beeman, who is out of our mechanical engineering department. He's the pioneer for 3D printing. Back then, it was called solid form fabrication, also known today as additive manufacturing, before it was cool to call it 3D printing. His company, called DTM Corp, was acquired by 3D Systems. And so, you know, universities have impact the technologies that we're using day to day and our local economy. So how many of you are familiar with how the commercialization works here on campus? Just a show of hands. Okay, so I'm going to go through it for you, coming out of the Office of Technology Commercialization. The way that it works here on campus is that, let's backtrack. We have two populations here on campus that technology can come out of. First population is our undergraduate students who take courses, and out of their courses are capstone programs that inventions can come out of. Now, the university can't pursue any intellectual property that comes from our undergrads because they're paying for a service. What they create in these classes belong to them and they can pursue it. What the university can protect are inventions that come from their employees that are discovered in the course of employment at the university. And so that means our faculty researchers are a source of intellectual property. And so that starts off with them filing an invention disclosure with the Office of Technology Commercialization. We then take that and look at its value proposition, talk to people in industry, and try to understand what its worth is. And when its merit is deemed good, then we follow suit with filing a provisional patent and then take it through the patent prosecution. Thereafter, as it's going through patent prosecution, what we're doing then is we're looking for ways to license it. And this is where companies and startups enter the scene and where Eric comes into the scene. What we want to be able to do is make sure that the ideas and discoveries here that are on our campuses find a useful home in the real world. Find a way for us to enrich our life with these discoveries. And so we will license it to big corporation, but in certain cases, if we can't do that, then we help our inventors, our researchers, start companies or look for startups to license it. You may not know this, but 70% of licensing in the United States go to startups and small businesses. And so this population is really important in helping to translate the research that we have going on campus. So you know, starting these companies are a hugely important way to get the technology out. So that in a snapshot is what the university does. Now, I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to start asking our panelists, but what I also would like to do is while we're talking up here, I'll ask you if you have any questions. So we'll just take questions along the way and have you just participate. We don't have to wait till the very end to ask questions, so we want to make sure that we capture everything dynamically as we're going along. So how many of you have heard about the terminology deep tech? Show of hands. Okay. I learned about this just a week ago because I was on a panel earlier this week for women in deep tech. I called it hard science up to this point, but essentially deep tech is, let's see, the definition that I found was essentially deep technology is based on tangible scientific discoveries, engineering innovations, mathematics, physics, medicine, chemistry, so things that are definitely coming out of the university. So what I want to ask you all is there are common difficulties that we see in impacting how technology comes out of the university. For the areas that you're working in, what have you observed so far that's been these hurdles?
Well, there's a number, I'll start. There's a number of hurdles, and we can talk about them across various parts of a matrix. One of them I will say is that as a basic researcher, one is looking to answer questions about mechanism of action, the basis for events to occur. Those types of observations rarely directly relate to practical application. One, though, many professors, though, can take a pivot to show application, and we call that proof of concept. And this is, does the thing work? And does it work under laboratory conditions? And that's one of the things that often forms the basis for the invention disclosures that may come to the university. There is, though, a pretty large gap, though, between what's proof of concept in a lab and what is of relevance to a company. And there are a number of experiments that need to be done to create what we call proof of relevance. which demonstrates that the operationalization or the function of that invention gives you an advantage over current states or the way things are done today, operationally. And then that also has to be tied into how does it affect economics of that invention as well. Is it, faster and better means nothing. Cheaper really rarely sells anything. It has to fit within economic ecosystems and create some real motion. Those experiments are rarely highly publishable. So we have a gap between what grants are given to do and what commercial entities need to see. And so this is where SBIR, STTR types of small business grants can be helpful. This is where seed capital can be useful, or acceleration funds. But this is one of the gaps in experimentation that often is there. And there's a number of projects and programs we have on campus to look to try to help professors identify how to cross those gaps. But that's one of the first pieces I've noticed in this matrix.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know if the mic is working, but I can still, that's fine. So,
Oh, there it
great.
goes.
So to add to Greg's point, right, so we do see a lot of these types of technologies at Texas Health Catalyst, and the conversations typically go like this, right? I have this platform technology that can pull down any protein of interest, and we are like, okay, so who's interested and what protein? And they'll be like, it could be any protein, it really doesn't matter. And then they start narrowing it down based on the they might be like, oh, it's so many kilodaltons and whatever, but they are still focused on the technology itself and not the utility of the technology. So we start kind of digging deeper into saying that, so who would use this? And their answer is still pretty broad. It's like, oh, pharma companies, and why would they use it for drug development? So it's almost like every single answer that you get is so broad that then we have to ask them, unless you identify exactly who's going to use it and why would they pay for it, to Greg's point, how do you know what to do next? Because the next experiment that you're doing has to be a type of experiment that gets the interest of either somebody who will fund you or partner with you, whatever, right? But how do you even get there without knowing all the answers to all those questions? So that's usually a big challenge, because when we ask these types of questions, the faculty and the researchers are not used to them. So they get very uncomfortable about, they are like, that's not my job. Like I will just bring in like a business person to answer these questions. But sometimes we have to tell them, why would a business person be even interested in what you're doing if you are not able to demonstrate the value of your technology? So that's one huge challenge where, yes, you have to know all these things, but sometimes they don't know the importance of knowing all these things, right? So that's usually something that we deal with all the time.
And that's really just a talent gap. The usual intuition is go grab an MBA student and they'll tell me what business stuff needs to be done. That's almost never the answer when you're that kind of deep tech. You need someone from industry who's been out there 20, 30 years and funded lots of attempts at this and failed most of the time, but also succeeded, to design that experiment, that proof of relevance experiment. Unless you do that from the industry perspective, it's not going to go anywhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say that's the summary of the last 2 years of my life, on top of, in addition to fundraising, which has been difficult for those very reasons. But yeah, when we licensed the technology with the patent, it was very much in an experimental setup, which was great, and there was a lot of good data, but it did take essentially 2 years, like until the spring of this last year, until we ran a functional efficacy test that would be in a product in the market, and that was a long time to figure out how to survive during that gap and how to get funding when everybody wants to see the data that you're fundraising the money for. So yeah, that's a definite huge challenge, as well as identifying what the opportunities are. In terms of tech commercialization, it's backwards from a lot of the lean startup or disciplined entrepreneurship methodologies of, you've got a very clearly defined problem and you go and build a solution a lot of this is you've got the solution and now you have to find the problem, because they are defined. A lot of times the research is platform agnostic, just by function of the way the research is being done. And then, so it can do all these great things, but how do you focus on the one great thing first to get it in there? And that means looking at a whole lot of markets and channels and everything to figure out that pathway if there is merit.
And the good news is that most universities are creating seed funds, grant funds to deal with that 2-year window. The best example at UT Austin is the Catalyst program. But we are severely lacking all of our peers nationally to put those kind of programs in place to help get our technologies and inventions to that point in time where they're relevant for industry action.
And I think that this gets at some other, so funding is a key piece that you have to have. You have an operating structure. We sometimes call them startups or laboratories. And then you have to have physical spaces to do the experiments in. And there are logical rules on how state-funded spaces can be used for private use or not. In other words, you can have a great lab with great equipment that you cannot use for private use by that professor. So you have to develop strategies of how to use core facilities, industry rates to pay for experiments. How do you use incubator spaces that may be present in unique areas like in the Dell Medical School or in the Austin Community College area that can be used in these areas, because there's reasons for a lot of the rules, but they get in the way of how do you get the money into an operating unit to do the experiment, to go back to the business to say whether it's sufficient or not. And so creating that ecosystem of interplay is challenging. And then the OTCs sit in the middle of this, in a sense, orchestrating how the value gets partitioned and gets recognized as people reduce risk, from highly risky platform idea to I've reduced it to practice and it works, to crap, that's really relevant. There's some money out there. And how do we monetize that?
Yeah, the two other big beasts in healthcare would be your regulatory and your reimbursement, right? Because it's not like your traditional, I built this great, cheaper, faster, better product and somebody will just buy it, because in healthcare, the buyer is not the user, is not the customer, is not like, it kind of keeps, there are like 6 people literally making a decision and none of them has single-handedly the power to make that decision, which is kind of very, very weird. So, and that's something that you have to plan up front, because something like what your pathway through the FDA will look like will determine if you have to raise $2 million or $10 million, which is like, it's a huge difference, right? So it even changes the type of investor that you go to if you need 2 versus 10. So the question then becomes, how do you decide that, and how do you design your product in the right way that it takes the right pathway? So it's too much of like, it's almost like you need to know the entire downstream pathway way, way, way early so that you don't get into all these barriers eventually where you say, oh, now I need this huge clinical trial because now if I miss one cell, then that means that it's a life or death matter, right? So how do you design your product in such a way that, like Eric was talking about, you get in easy, the entry point is easy, but then you can pivot and do a lot of things, but at least you are hitting the market, making an impact on patients.
So Eric, one thing I was wanting to know was when you went to, how did you go about picking the technology that you ended up picking to form your company? Because coming directly out of the university, you probably just engaged with a professor and their grad student and knew about their IP, but there was no structure around it. What made you, what incentivized you to go towards their particular technology?
Great question. And I actually didn't know, in that case, I didn't know them ahead of time, the inventor, the professor, because they were at Purdue. I was here at UT. I had the benefit in the MSTC program of learning a structure called a quick look. It was developed at NASA. It's taught in the program. ATI and IC squared still use different forms of it. But it's a way of quick is relative. It's still an intensive process, but it's a way of, in roughly 100 hours of work, talking with experts and evaluating the market and the technology and the potential to at least do an initial kind of screening and say, all right, at a high level, does this make sense or can I just discard it? And so my team and I in the MSTC program did that on 4 or 5 different technologies and then had picked this one out of Purdue. And we literally just found them online. It started with Google searches for available licenses, which is, I would say, a barrier on the startup side in terms of interfacing with tech transfer and universities is finding these technologies. Some universities are better than others at putting it out there. Others are much more opaque. And it's like, hey, I'm interested in this. Nice. Goodbye. Like, hard to get through. So identifying the technologies, kind of quickly evaluating them in the program, and then engaging with the professors, with the post-grads, with the tech transfer office, and developing that conversation further. They want to know that you've got a plan to move this out of the university and accomplish some milestones to move it further down the field. And so developing that plan with them and the relationship was the beginning of the process. And then keeping the faculty and the inventors involved has been very important for me, and bringing them onto the advisory board and having regular calls and updates with them and keeping them very engaged. And it has been instrumental in being able to allow us to get some of the testing recently. So that's been the short version of some of the process.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, now, do we have any questions from the audience? Any of you ever encountered any difficulties dealing with the university? Only see one pair of hands, yes.
The other place beyond licensing, anyway, ought to be patents, or are you doing your search post-patent, or pre-patent?
I'm looking post-patent filing, so they may not all be issued, but they've at least been filed. Some are issued and farther along, depending on the state of the tech. But the process that Van described earlier with the invention disclosures and the patent descriptions, then I'm coming in, looking at the patents and going from there. Oh, definitely looking at those. So I want to see at least patent filings and a couple of research publications to at least start.
Yeah. I mean, one way, so there's 2 ways to look at this. Anytime you see a publication, you know that a good university has already filed a patent before that publication has been visually found online. Mm-hmm. Our patenting system recognizes the confidentiality of the review process and peer review to not be public disclosure. So once you see the paper, you usually have to wait between 12 and 18 months to see that patent application publish. So you have to wait and find out if it's competitive technology, what would it look like? But this gets back at one of the issues of why the Quick Look was developed. It actually was developed so you can answer the question, should I file a patent or should I not? That's the first question. Because can you find a prior art that says that what they're doing is really not that novel? B, are there problems that can be solved by this technology that are obvious in the marketplace based on the voice of the market? And 3, what kind of data has been accomplished, and will it support a patent application? And so if those questions are yes, yes, and yes, it's going to work, then go file the patent, because that's the question NASA wanted to ask first. The next question they wanted to ask is, the technology off their shelf, is there a market outside of space that it can be applied for? And the Quick Look, shockingly, can be applied also to that, to say, how do I pivot a technology from a space application to a civilian application?
And I've subscribed to tech research for a long time. Is there a way to say it's been published?
Yes.
For them to say it's been published, I guess to sell it as a source.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many more of those are there. I mean, Science
Well, I mean, I think being up to date on what's going on it will charge you to get articles, but it takes a lot of time to be an expert in an area of science. So you understand the nuances of how the technology flows. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur in the deep technology area, you're going to be a technology expert. You're going to know this area extremely well. You're going to go to scientific meetings. You're going to go to industry meetings. You're going to understand the nuances so that you can fit your technology competitively against the fact that these are not new problems. These are old problems. Most of them already have solutions. You have to actually out-solution the solution.
I understand that part a little easier there. Two hang-ups for me have been the cost, and I'm not, now can I go to very fast and honor or something? Is he a useful resource if I'm just alone?
So here's a different search you should do. The hardest thing about startups is the people. You should be doing people searches, not patent searches. And once you can find the right people, you can build a team around that. And you need the right domain expertise, of course. And you look at the names on papers and patents as a one way to narrow your search, like the graph search you're going to do. But that's the more important aspect. And it's a much harder thing to do. If you don't have the right person, you end up lacking the resources like Eric has for follow-on research. You need to build a long-term IP strategy, and that's predicated on the right people being part of your team. If you're just going to take, a one-time patent out of university, that's a very different conversation.
And I think that this is where relationships in the university help you. So when you have a relationship with a professor, their graduate students, or let's say you have an intern from the university, they have access to university databases, university libraries that give you access to things that as a non-university person, it would be very costly or very prohibitive.
Market research reports.
Oh, of course you do. But I will tell you the power, we can quantitate and look at the power of impact of a good student on business impact. And I know if you were in the lab, what the power of a good student is on technical impact. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm a big proponent of students being a great monetary investment.
And while we are on the subject of patents, I don't know if the other panelists agree with me, this might be very controversial, but typically patents are worthless, right? So it's very funny, unless it's something really earth-shaking, like for example, CRISPR, which probably you all must have heard about in the news. There's a lot of, tussle happening regarding who really owns the IP. But other than some of those really kind of earth-shattering discoveries, most patents are just a mechanism to defend yourself. So I wouldn't really even start with the patent as when you're talking about innovation, right? It's really, again, it boils down to what is the problem that you're solving and how is it better than other solutions out there, rather than is there a novel patent, because that would really mean nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I would not say that the patent, coming from, not my OTC hat on, but my startup hat on, is for us, patents were critical. It essentially protected us from getting blocked. It allowed us to practice what we were doing, but also it helped us in fundraising. It was an asset, and when we went to external investors, they wanted to see their investment protected. And so, you look at what it is that you want to invest your time in, but then when your business starts going, how do you protect that asset? How do you grow your business, protect the area of the market that you're in, and expanding into other market space? And so, at different stages.
I completely agree with that, though. Like I was saying, it's more of a defensive thing, right? It's more of freedom to operate, more of like when the VCs are looking at you, that's one box that they have to check. But when you are at a really, really early stage, that's not the only thing that's what I was trying to do.
Sure.
But a bad patent, in other words, if you disclose a methodology of how you do something, it's a really bad patent, because there's no way to actually enforce that methodology without the power of, an investigation that there's a legal basis for it. So how do you create a fingerprint on that methodology on the product that you can detect when someone is using your methodology. So there's a strategy of how to develop patents and how to implement those that create enhanced value as intangible assets. And I agree that I'm a very strong proponent of using intellectual property to defend valuations. But how you write the patent and how you protect your intellectual property is extraordinarily important. It's not numbers of patents. I mean, I've been a part of a lot of patents, but half of them are worth nothing, and others have been worth $100 million. So there we go. You can't tell when you're filing what will really win the day often.
Yes.
In a situation where the intellectual property is developed by the school has an ownership stake in that intellectual property and it's then commercialized, what is the most typical way that the university receives remuneration for that? Is it through royalty or is it through an equity position in the company that commercializes?
It really varies, but the main model that we use is through royalties. The royalty comes back to the university. 50% of it goes to the researcher to continue in their research, to use towards innovation, and the other 50% goes towards defraying the cost of patent prosecution. Yeah.
So the royalty is typically a percentage of the revenue?
Really depends on the situation. I
Every-
can't give you
literally
a straight
every-
answer on this, mainly because the way our office works is we really sit down and see what it is that you're wanting, and then craft a contract that suits your needs and what is best for the university. And so, we look at the value proposition of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But what we want to make sure that we do is nurture the relationship.
So, and last thing, at what stage typically does that negotiation happen? Pre-patent, post-patent?
It is both. It depends on at what stage you come in and you take a look at the invention. The intellectual property that you're interested in may be at a provisional stage or at the application stage while we're prosecuting it. It may already have been a patent, and so it just really depends on the stage of it, and we work with all sorts.
Keep in mind that timing is a big deal. So the provisional patent strategy is a very powerful one. It gives you 364 days after filing to file a utility patent. And this is a period of time where you can perfect the invention, seek licensees through relationships, but it's also a very nascent patent. It's not highly documented as a utility would be. Once that utility patent is filed, typically there is a period of time before it is published and then is easily searchable. Again, the age of that patent is also very important, because if you are the startup and you license this to Johnson & Johnson, they will be paid royalties until the last patent in the license expires. And so the age of the patent, how you build a portfolio, is very critical on how you monetize that agent, because again, large companies own space around the patents. And the last piece is when you license to a large company, generally it's going to be challenged some way down the line, because when something is valuable, people call into question whether you have rights to own that value. So, cutting corners on the patenting process often comes back to haunt you later in the commercialization process.
And to be specific on that, it's tempting to try to do the patent yourself if you can get the licensing office to decline it. But having UT Austin, the Board of Regents, as your big brother on the playground when the bully comes to pick on you is a really great thing for a startup to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having that backup and that checkbook and the rigor against it is fantastic when someone picks on you. So think about that.
Because a patent just doesn't have to be filed, it has to be maintained and prosecuted as well. So
And the way,
that's
Be
huge.
really cautious on your licensing office that they are maintaining and everything.
yes.
They drop the ball all the time. There are some universities that are not as good as UT at maintaining that.
And why it'll give you a literal example. I have a patent that is expiring in 2020, and this is 2018. We just created an invention off of this that could be extraordinarily valuable. And we just got finished, 2 years ago paying that last maintenance fee. This gives us an opportunity to hold some value while we file the next patents and move forward. But these things are, you never know how this is all going to work. It's very, very challenging to be prescriptive and predictive.
Yes.
So,
I know, we're just the questions.
So from the exterior, somebody looking in at a university or any location, large organization that has a lot of intellectual property, how is it most often, because I have visions of like a digital Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse, right? IP after IP, just in these giant warehouses, and just as powerful as UT Austin is, I can turn and look at Rice, and I can turn and look at, Philadelphia, Purdue, and Eric's example. All that IP is in search of a problem to be solved. How do you help somebody from the exterior see the value and the possibility in their problem space of an IP solution that they just, quite frankly, in the case of Martin Futures Command, wouldn't even have even understanding of what the art of the possible is?
Yeah.
Because you have your own digital warehouses,
Yes.
just like the Army has warehouses in the military.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So we have this asset, and I'll have to tell you, it's not organized very well. I don't think any TTO office has a way of just Rolodexing it so that you can pull out whatever it is that you want. And I think one of our biggest challenges so far here at UT is generating IP, but not knowing where it's going to go. And so my personal take on it is we really need to start thinking about problem first and going out and asking people like you, and looking forward to engaging with you, what your challenges are, and then coming back and putting together a portfolio that addresses your needs. And so I think UT needs to be better at going out and interfacing with members in industry, the military, any sources that we can learn about how useful our IP can be. And we haven't been doing a good job at that.
So I would say a shockingly small amount of university-generated IP is codified in patents.
Yep.
I don't know what it is, but my guess is 5% or less, maybe 1 or below. And so that's, again, my point. It's about the people. The real asset you want to go find are the people who are in your problem spaces and technology spaces, and build long-term relationships with them. And do that in partnership with the licensing office. So over the next 5, 10, 20 years, as that lab generates insights that are valuable to you, you understand how to take advantage of that.
So
So one thing I want to mention is that in the Office of Technology Commercialization, we work very closely with our researchers. Our licensing specialists go visit our researchers on a regular basis to follow what they're developing. And in some cases, when they're filing a disclosure, it's not ready. That value proposition isn't there. And we'll go back and talk to them about it. We'll do some market research and tell them, hey, we talked to so-and-so in this industry, and this is what they're looking at, and this is why they're saying that they're not ready to make an investment. But if you pivot this way, then you can make an impact. And so that kind of feedback, and us working closely with our researchers and having you come to work with us, we can link all of the players together to really make something out of the situation. So that you're not just handed this IP, but not the people that is involved in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things you have to keep in mind is researchers act differently than startup communities. Startup communities aggregate together because that's just what they do. We all come together, we all have problems, we all need money, we all need this, we all need that. So we all come together and we do this. Researchers really flock only with people who are highly like themselves, or unless they see opportunities. So like give you an example, the hackathon this weekend. We really wanted a lot of professors to be involved. And although I was not able to attend, I was talking to lots of professors, and they're very, very busy people. Unless they understand how this fits into their unique world, they see a drone IT hackathon about drone IT hackathon. They say, I don't do drone IT stuff. But they don't think about how their invention could pivot into this. However, us creating a strategy where we talk about remote AI interventions, and we invite a number of professors to make some presentations, and we offer the power of coffee or beer to interact with other humans, then you'll find there may be 7 people you didn't meet that have deeper insight into the problem about how to remotely access and recode a drone because of how they're thinking about maybe it's a cryptocurrency strategy in their research. It has nothing to do with drones, but they didn't understand your problem because they do this. And we've got to find ways to thematically get the right people in the rooms to talk about what they want to talk about and then pivot into what you want to talk about. It's just a different way of approaching humans just because of how they think.
And there's a plug here for accelerators and incubators, right?
Thank you. Yay.
So we are all paid to do that. Like that is our job, to be those connectors of those technologies that are hunting for problems to solve, and people like you who bring those problems.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like Greg said, it's not very clear. It's very hard for either party to engage with each other because you're always like, where do I go? It's a big world. And like you said, UT probably has like hundreds of patents just lying around, and you don't want to be sifting through those. So the way we look at it is we bring a bunch of advisors, both clinical and business, to vet these, and as part of the process, it gets very clear that, oh, this is something that the DoD might be interested in because I have this connection, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes it's not a structured process. It might just be like to your point of it's the people, right? So bringing the right people to the right technology at the right time, that's really like what we do. So I think there is something to be said about that as well.
Yeah, and since a lot of this stuff does have dual use things, you bring in the entrepreneurs into this process, and you can solve the Army problem first, but then the company has a growth path. And from a startup perspective, if I know I've got a path to the Army, through the Army first, I know investors are going to pour cash into that, and then I've got a growth plan, and they're going to want to fund that. And so it makes it a lot easier to get through some of these gaps when they see the backing of these organizations.
I think it's really epistatic. Let me just give you one quick story. We worked with a company that had the only technology that was not cross-licensed between Apple, Samsung, and Google for noise reduction in phones. They all amplify, they reduce ambient noise. This technology amplified target voice, so it comes above. And they could not understand why Samsung and Apple didn't care. It would save about 30% of battery life. It had all these benefits, you could argue. And they just didn't understand why users care about batteries, but Samsung and Apple, they don't. But it's kind of strange. They came to Austin. They were going through a Starbucks, ordering coffee, and they're this going on. And they realized the massive problem about these intercom systems. And then they drove by Chick-fil-A, and they realized that it's 100 degrees outside, and there's this person with an iPad taking orders outside of Chick-fil-A. And they asked the person, why? And they realized that the quality of service and quality of accuracy of orders, so they didn't have to waste the food, is more important than paying an extra person's salary to sit out there and take an order. Now that technology has been now monetized into those mic systems. It was developed for phones. Now it's in almost all the mic systems in the United States to amplify target voice. But it was all because of a Chick-fil-A. And it's all about getting people that random surface area thing. Sorry, I interrupted you, Paul.
The one follow-up on it. So as somebody like Futures Command comes and engages, do you have a recommended short, an article, an essay, something to read, someone to follow? Because what you'll find, I think, is you're going to find, I'm having to help translate right now to some very senior people who have great dialogue and great understanding for the most part in the national security space, but maybe don't have the dialogue and the terminology, even the way to understand a lot of those things which may be A, startup related, or B, academic related, right? And as much as the Department of Defense gets given proper grief for many acronyms in its own subcultural language, I would offer that the academic world and the startup community also has a very similarly dense vocabulary.
Yeah.
So what could I point at and say, hey boss, if
Yeah. So we have an online process that was built out of the MSDC degree called Innovation Readiness. It basically takes the language of commercialization and it reduces it through examples that you can do kind of as a flip the classroom set of environment. And that may be useful because one can do it at their own risk and time, and you can get a PDF manual of that and carry that around if you want or care. That is one tool that allows you to get from soup to nuts, sort of that initial experience. The second question about meeting faculty, I think this is a great way the OTC and Futures Command could be interfaced together to give you great visibility into verticals of expertise offered on the campus and create a model that can be replicated with A&M, with Texas State, with the medical centers very readily. So I think this is Van would be awesome at that. Sorry, volunteer Van on that, but it seems the right thing to do.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say that maybe isn't that exactly one of the things that is missing is trying to have a balance between trying to invent new things, human beings, right? Instead of just improving, aggregating, adding value, right? So that's part of the deep tech versus deep value discussion that a lot of people miss many of these opportunities because they're looking about the deep tech side of things and the big invention, the big breakthrough, but they are forgetting that by improving something, and these are the Ubers, the Facebooks, Facebook didn't start as a deep tech company. It wasn't a deep tech company. So the thing is that we're missing a lot of value just by focusing on inventing, patenting, making breakthroughs instead of improving, aggregating, even reusing things that are already invented.
Yeah.
Why is that balance? That's my question.
So I think when you start with a problem, like Van was saying, then it all falls into place, right? Because if the problem that Facebook was trying to solve was that people are spread all across the globe now and they have no way to communicate with each other, share pictures, whatever, and that's what they wanted to solve, which is why I was initially saying that in that scenario, patents are really worthless. It's about what you're solving, right? So it all depends on, again, as long as you start with the voice of the customer and the problem, there will always be ways to commercialize that, but that doesn't mean that it's easy, right? Because there was Facebook and there were 100 other social networking sites at that point, but today we only have 4 or 5 left that are the major ones. So they are dealing with completely different forces than the other ones that we are talking about, which are deep tech. So it's just a different set of challenges when you do it that way.
Yeah, I think it is a combination. I'm going to use the hackathon as an example because I actually participated and led a team, and I don't know much about drones at all. But I took that approach with our team, and so there were a lot of great teams working on coding and innovating new stuff. Our team ended up going with an aggregate currently available technology, and so we built a system and looked at, all right, what is the sensors and batteries and things that we could pull in off the shelf.
Awesome.
And we built the model around that and made it modular so that as new stuff's developed in the future, we could plug it in. But in that case, it was a situation of we focused a lot on the problem first, and then actually started looking at the pieces and found, okay, hey, there are components out there that would work. It could be better in the future, but this will work right now. And so I think there's short-term solutions like that where tech transfer plays a big role, as well as partnering for the new innovation to meet specific problem sets in the future.
Yes.
Yes, I'm an engineering graduate, and I was wondering if there are other places besides the OTC where you can get involved with licensing or technology transfer. I talked to the OTC and they told me they weren't hiring, so there's got to be some other places.
So the IC Squared Institute hires a lot of students to work with students in the Austin Technology Incubator, to work with our global programs, and you will do projects that fit your skills. Business students work on business problems, engineering students work on engineering problems, and we link you to a startup as, in a sense, like an internship where you have to practice your skills in a more expansive way than you normally would in a class.
Okay, I've already graduated, so.
Ah.
So is there opportunities? Like maybe in the
Yeah, when did you graduate? Because there's wiggle room if you know the exact right HR codes to plug into some system. I'm not kidding. At ATI, we played this game all the time because
Mark's
we
really
see
good at this.
graduates who are going to be entrepreneurs. We want to bring them in the fold and get them going and kind of play the person.
Right, I love entrepreneurship.
Yep.
But I graduated about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Volunteering, yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
So we are always looking for talent. So it's not that I wouldn't say we are hiring, but like Greg was going to say, volunteering, helping us do things, helps you get plugged in with our ecosystem, right? And then you meet people like Eric who might, raise a huge round and then start hiring. So it's
Totally.
again really about, so it's again about meeting the right people.
Yeah. So the other thing you can do is gaining some experience, and then with that you can leverage large companies. So companies like Shell has like a venture arm, companies like Samsung. Tapping into those resources could also get you into another aspect of technology commercialization on the other side of the university rather than being in a TTO, which is also very exciting too.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is sort of a follow-up answer to you, but Tim Ferriss talks about lowering credibility, and he also likes to volunteer for nonprofits as a way to gain like instant credibility. So that can help experience as well.
Okay.
To you guys, hi, my name's Jetty. I'm going to kind of take this the opposite approach as the patent, training we've been on, but oh, by the way, before I forget, Bart, hope says hi.
Hello. Thank you.
So I'm sort of taking this in the reverse direction. I'm a startup. I'm a founder who is also a Texas X and trying to bring in startups technology to benefit students on campus, to do a pilot study on campus. There's like some law books that we think this could benefit, and I would be interested in this. So my challenge has been navigating the UT system to find the right decision makers, learning about, getting to the right people to learn about how to navigate the system has been a journey in itself, as I'm sure you all have learned as well. I'm just sort of wondering a few things, so feel free to answer any of these questions. One, because my startup's technology does require some, let's say, health information, PHI, very, very, very light. It does introduce some legal considerations that we want to de-risk. For other startups in my position, how could we better engage with the university's legal department to sort of like troubleshoot these in advance of these critical conversations we have? Two, what is Delmet's interest in working with innovative startups that affect the health tech space? And then three, this is more sort of general, what sort of initiatives do you all have in just simplifying this this process and this roadmap so it's not a sub-journey side quest to learn and navigate all this before we actually go and navigate and execute?
I'm having a similar issue at the University of South Florida. I live in Tampa. So if you could answer his question and maybe throw in some general university around the country guidelines, that would be great too.
So I'm going to be very blunt at the first thing. The universities are not here to solve your problems. Okay, so I want you to get that out of your way. So if you don't know what HIPAA is, if you don't know how to make software systems HIPAA compliant, don't come talk to us. Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go figure it out. And why I'm saying this is there's a responsibility on the startup side to understand regulation, to understand practice, and to de-risk your technology so you approach channels for, let's say, testing or clinical trials, as in human access, with a de-risk tool so that it makes it easy. The worst thing you can do to a large organization is go to their legal department. You're not their business, and they have a lot of other bigger problems. So it's very low priority, and that's why you may find the issues. If you take down the risk points so that you can demonstrate that you are compliant, then it's a much easier process to get these things reviewed. And this involves not only your software makeup, its validation and its structure, but also how you have an institutional review board for clinical trials. If you're going to be taking in data, testing data from actual humans, you need to be very familiar with that. And that's where professors in the university can help you on that side to engage and help you solve some of those problems because they know how to do that. And then Del Med, of course, I think it's a transition to you.
So that's, I completely agree with that, right? When startups and entrepreneurs come to us half-baked, it's really hard for us to plug them in directly into our system. But having said that, the Catalyst program has actually helped a few entrepreneurs like you where they came to us with a very, very, very early idea, but something in that, like the proposal that they submitted, resonated very well with our clinicians and a couple of business advisors. And I am actually going to blog about this very soon. And that company that came to us, it was a single entrepreneur last year. Now he's actually launched his app in the App Store with a partnership with one of our clinicians and a business advisor. So it does happen. It's not that it doesn't, but then if you want to increase your chances of success, then I would do exactly this. But then on the other side, if you were to get, if you want to say that that's hard as well, I don't have all that yet, I would encourage you to talk to the potential end users and customers. You can even apprehend people at cafes and things like that. That's the I-COR philosophy, right?
Yep.
Literally, get out of the building, because in healthcare, if you don't have a champion, you don't have anything. The only reason why that entrepreneur succeeded was that clinician latched onto him and said, you can solve a problem that I have. It wasn't even that he was solving that problem. So the clinician gave him a problem. He gave him the challenges that he would face if he solved that problem. So it's almost like he got a lot of advice and feedback just because he came to us, right? That can happen as well, but I'm not saying it'll happen in every case, but it's all about finding that person where your idea really resonates and solves their problem.
Yeah. Go around bureaucracy, go around obstacles until you get a cease and desist.
Totally.
Don't let people in suits up there stop you.
But no, I will say this, but if you are going to work with human data, know that there are regulations around that regulate how you do this. Folks on campus can help you be aware of those and be compliant so you don't have to get into a stoppage point. And it's done to protect the people involved. I know it may seem like a pain, but honestly, it's done to protect the patient and their privacy and their value. And the more you can be ready for that, people actually love innovation on campus. They just don't like to be derailed in doing your job for you. So I think that the best thing to do is getting a faculty champion would be a big deal and take down a lot of doors.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I would encourage you to do is if you Google Texas Health Catalyst, we do have a form on our website which says submit your innovation. That's one way to at least get on our radar, right? So then we start kind of showing that to some of our stakeholders, and if somebody bites, then that's definitely, so that's the unstructured part of doing it, which I would definitely do if I were you. So the structured way is like we do partner with entrepreneurs, we do co-development deals where DelMed partners with an entrepreneur to launch a company, things like that, and I'm happy to kind of go, I don't want to take this time to do that, but again, it has to be de-risked enough for us to be able to even look at it as a deal. So that's completely, I agree with Greg.
And then in terms of navigating the ecosystem here on campus, it is confusing, and it's a very large network. And what has happened in our office is that we end up getting a lot of different emails coming in asking us for this or that. And so what we do is we'll refer you to the right partners that we know about. And so we try to facilitate that as much as possible. So if there's something here at UT that you're looking for, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So we are at 12:15. And so this conversation has gone by very quickly, and it's been a wonderful one, and it was lovely to have the audience participate. And then I want to thank our panelists for joining me here today. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.